When I was a law clerk for the District Court for the District of Columbia in the mid-1990s, I saw what I am convinced was an act of jury nullification. A young man was accused of selling a relatively small quantity of illegal drugs. He was prosecuted in federal court for that. And during the trial, it came out that the way that the government, the federal government, went about gathering the evidence against him was that they approached him with an undercover DEA agent who befriended the young man and then pestered him over a period of several weeks to sell the DEA agent some drugs. The first time the DEA agent asked the young man who became the defendant to sell him some drugs, he said no. Second time, no. Third time, no. And it was only after pestering this young man over and over again in the guise of this false friendship that had been created for law enforcement purposes that the young man finally sold a relatively small quantity of drugs. I wasn't present in the jury room, so I don't know exactly what the jury thought of the case. I think it was fairly clear to everybody in the courtroom, presumably also the jurors, that the government had behaved in a rather despicable and unethical fashion in effectively setting this kid up and befriending him, or at least giving the appearance of befriending him, for the sole purpose of trying to persuade him to sell some drugs. A real drug dealer, it should not be that difficult to persuade a real drug dealer to sell drugs. And so I think the jury probably concluded that he was not, in fact, a genuine drug dealer, but just somebody who'd been pestered into finally selling a person who he thought was a friend some drugs. And this, I want to make a larger point here, which is that we often think of jury nullification in the context of preventing unjust prosecutions, laws that are unjust, or sentences that are unjust. But I think there's another facet to it as well, and that is that jury nullification may sometimes occur when jurors feel that the tactics that law enforcement has used were disproportionately unethical or immoral compared to the wrong or the alleged wrong of the case. So when the government, for example, uses things like spying or threats against a defendant or a witness's family in order to coerce them into participating in the investigation, when they entrap people or walk up to that line, which is, I think, what happened in the case that I've described. These are all examples that I think that people find ethically problematic. And it may be that there are some things that you would tolerate, for example, as a juror, or countenance the government doing if, for example, they were trying to break up a terrorist ring that was genuinely trying to set off a nuclear bomb or unleash some terrible kind of poison, but that don't seem appropriate and in fact seem downright despicable when used for relatively lower level crimes, including particularly crimes where there's no clear victim, like the possession or distribution of drugs. So that's another aspect or another facet in which jury nullification can be, should be, such an important part of our system, which is keeping a check on the tactics that government uses in order to acquire evidence that it then uses in a criminal prosecution. Prosecutors should be thinking in the back of their minds, how is this going to look to a jury, the way we approach this case, the things we did in order to get this evidence against the defendant. And now, the way things are now, I don't think they think carefully enough about that. But if jury nullification were a more significant part of their system, I think we can all bet that they would, and we'd be better for it.